Hello there. We hope you're staying well and safe. We are joining you from the Goethe Institute in Colombo, bringing you the Children in Lockdown Arts Festival 2021. I am Lakshita, your host for today. Now, we all know that the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has not been easy on any of us. But have we, for a moment, stopped to realize the impact of the pandemic on our children and our families? Have we asked them, have we spoken to them as to what they feel about the pandemic, the restrictions, the lockdown, and everything surrounding it? The Children in Lockdown Arts Festival is our attempt to view the pandemic through their point of view. It is our attempt to be resilient. It is our attempt to give them a voice and make sure that their voice is being heard. The process behind the festival started 6 months back in a specially curated program by the Stages Theatre Group, which was supported by Kinder Not Here for Sri Lanka. Different artists came together and worked tirelessly to bring together 20 artworks, which includes short films, plays, puppetry, publications, and so on. The lead up to the festival also included a mentorship program where amateur artists were mentored by professionals in the respective fields, and their artworks are also featured in this festival. What's special about this particular festival is that it brings both adults and children onto the same platform, because we believe that both parties are equally important stakeholders when we try to find answers and navigate our way through these challenging times. The festival is a virtual event where we discuss the treatment and experiences of children and families during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, don't get discouraged by the fact that I mentioned that it's a virtual event, because as I mentioned earlier, the festival will feature a series of different artwork screenings, panel discussions, and workshops. You can view the artwork screenings by joining our web broadcast on www.stages.lk/artsfestival or through our YouTube channel and Facebook page. Just to give you an overview, the festival spans across 3 days where we have 2 sessions within each day, and the artists and the professionals delve into discussing 6 pandemic related themes. Today's themes are health and mental well-being and abuse during the pandemic. With all of that being said, we invite you, your family and your friends to join with Children in Lockdown Arts Festival and stay tuned with us right from the first day onwards. At the same time, please do take some time to view our virtual exhibition, which is also available on our website. We now move on to the very first session of the festival. To those of us who have just seen global pandemics on a television screen, COVID-19 pandemic was the real thing. It affected the most powerful nation and the poorest nation, the most influential man and the common man alike. Hospitals were full to the brim, millions were dying. There was hysteria and paranoia in the entire world. It brought along so many changes to our daily lifestyles with all these restrictions, the lockdown and all these measures. And COVID-19 also brought along with it several unheard of issues where we had to battle with ourselves, we had to battle with our families and so on. In this very first session of the Children in Lockdown Arts Festival, we discuss about health and mental well-being during the pandemic, and we feature 2 short films, an artist talk, and later on we are joined by a panel of professionals to delve deeper into these issues. The session will close with a workshop conducted for the children. In our very first artwork screening, it asks from us a very heavy yet a very interesting question. Well, we all undergo life-altering experiences, but if that particular experience leaves your life entirely in the hands of a third party, how safe would you feel? Is that when you ask yourself the question, am I ready to die? We take a look at how Natalie and Shayne attempt, or how they pursue an answer to this question in the artwork screening that follows. Given the sensitive nature of the content of this artwork, we advise that this particular artwork is more suited for mature audiences.
Am I ready to die? I've been asking myself since June this year. The question gives me a false sense of power, as if I get to choose the day and the manner in which I cease to exist. Being terminally ill means you are forced to ask yourself these questions. Mars asks if I'm worried about the afterlife. I've stopped worrying about what would happen on the other side. My concern is now more on how I would leave this life. Would I die in excruciating pain? Would the morphine stop working? I don't fear death. I fear pain. In March last year, locked up in a tiny apartment, I found a lump in my right breast. I knew it was cancer, but my son and I were stuck under a militant lockdown, so we waited and felt the tumor grow larger and harder. The day after the lockdown was lifted, Po and I went to the closest hospital. I wanted a woman oncologist. A woman felt safer, so that's who I picked. She examined me behind a curtain and told me it was cancer. The right breast, where the tumor had formed, had begun to metastasize. My lymph nodes were already victim to the spreading demon inside me. Po walked inside the curtains. Tears filled my eyes, seeing the tears in hers. I have a little boy, I told the oncologist. I can't leave him just yet. She told me that she would cure me in 5 months. My lady doctor prescribed several ultrasound scans and a long-term dose of tamoxifen, a drug I had never heard of. She asked me to get the scans immediately and to get back to her to confirm the diagnosis. When we returned with the scans, she was gone. Of course, we had needed time for crying, comforting, holding hands, trying to make sense of how bad things looked. We went home, and Po needed to return home to hers, and probably to get some space from me so she could call Chaz and Nadine and let them know. Nadine was just waking up on the other side of the world. I speak to some friends, women who I love deeply, but maybe no longer recognize nor relate to. These well-meaning friends ask other doctor friends about cancer specialists. The name Panduka pops up. He's the best. I ask him about the tamoxifen. That's optional, he scoffs. The best was telling me that tamoxifen was optional, so it must be true. I return with a mammogram. Dr. P complains that the woman who conducted my mammogram had been sloppy. What next, I ask? What is the stage of diagnosis? He answers my second question first. End of stage 3. Stage 4 comes next. Dr. P then passes me on to his oncologist, Dr. Dehan. Occasionally logic escapes me, like when I allowed myself to be carted off to a doctor without knowing his specialization. Dr. P, I now realized, was a surgeon. My friends check around. Dr. Dehan, the oncologist, is also The best, we are told. Dr. D asks about my social circumstances. I'm a single mother running a home, raising a child on a low income. He asks me to register at Apeksha Hospital, Maharagama, the free state-run healthcare facility dedicated to the treatment of cancer. My father died there. I haven't been able to walk back since. He was treated for lung cancer and he was treated inhumanely. Beggars can't be choosers is my family motto when it suits the delivering of unsolicited cliches. This is why I avoid gatherings, large crowds, parties. Give me a bottle of wine, a joint, and the company of 2 or 3 in the comfort of my home, and I'll show you how beautiful a private life can be. I visited Maharagama from May 2020 to February 2021. They may not know that I am no longer a patient there, because from February to date, they never called me up to inquire why I have been missing my appointments. You put your cancer and your life in their hands. Your job is to find the strength to go on. Their job is to make you feel they care enough. I ask about the chemo. What kind, how often, how many, side effects. Dr. D says doxorubicin once in 3 weeks, 8 doses, and nausea, gastritis, hair fall. This seemed acceptable. I had always wanted to go bald and journey along the Hellhound Trail, visiting every delta of the Mississippi Blues. So then, am I ready to die? Are all journeys important? Yes, to me the Hellhound was. Chemotherapy happened once in 3 weeks. It went like this. Wake up 5 a.m., leave home 6 a.m., reach hospital 7 a.m. to avoid the chaos of 7:30 a.m. Queues form and reform endlessly as medical files are shuffled around. I head to the medical oncology wing located on the 2nd floor of the administrative building, formerly called the New Building, until a shiny new Razavi building stole its identity shortly after my father passed away. On days I took Daddy for chemo treatments, I signed him in, settled him down, and then walked around the construction site. Little did I know that I would be butchered and tormented here just 4 years later. No, I don't speak in hyperbole. When I say butchered, I mean butchered. And torment is too kind a word for the kind of torture I had to endure. The process of first getting in, then trying to see a doctor who will pass you on for chemo, it hasn't changed much since the days I was the escort and not the patient. A miracle of favor gets you seen at 10:30, otherwise you wait till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. There are many who have come from distant places, and of course, everyone here is very sick. You aren't always allowed to see Dr. D. You have to draw his attention. Plain old metastatic breast cancer just wasn't exciting enough for him. For each visit, you needed new blood tests. Tests have to be done the night before or the morning of your treatment. You get your tests free at the hospital or faster at a private laboratory. I was blessed. I always had company. Sometimes not 1 but 2 people with me. But so many travel alone to the hospital, weak and gauntly from treatments. I wondered how they did it. how they had the strength to go back home. They look at your test from a safe distance and prescribe your dose from afar. Same pills for nausea and gastritis, as if chemo is generic and affects everyone the same way. Dr. D told me I was getting just doxorubicin, but my plan included a cocktail of the Red Devil and cyclophosphamide. Why wasn't I given all the information? I have deep concerns about how healthcare providers operate. You achieve MD or consultant status. You are allowed to have your own patients, see them privately for the money, see them in state facilities for the fame. Rare cases are higher in government institutions. I think they get hungry for annual publications. Many doctors consult in 2 or 3 private institutions. In each place, they see 20 to 30 patients a day, sometimes 8 days a week. Patients pay an average of 3,000 per channeling. The money is divided between the hospital and doctor. These sessions often last a maximum of 5 to 7 minutes, sometimes less than 3. To fill their pockets with patients, doctors often rush through the process. So many patients, so few hours. But how does a human being assess a complex illness like cancer in under 3 minutes? Things slip through the cracks. Look at me. I am proof. I went to the National Cancer Institute in May 2020 with breast cancer. 9 mets in my skull, a massive fluid buildup in the brain, a dislocation in the left brain ventricle. And how did I discover all this? In June 2021, 1 year after my diagnosis, and because of blinding headaches and my family doctor ordering an MRI. The best hospital I had been visiting for over a year had just not bothered. Since June, I have been asking myself if I was ready to die. I have also been asking myself if I could have been saved. Had the cancer hospital run the tests they should have. Since June, we have found tumors in my liver and 1 in my left lung. Meds have also been found in the T4 region of my spine, my entire pelvis, 1 lung, a femur, a leg, a rib. If my doctor wasn't seeing a few hundred other patients a day, maybe he would have noticed that my metastasizing cancer needed to be checked far more often and ordered more tests for me. But no, he only treated me for breast cancer. They all did. Now that I'm staring death in the face, am I allowed to ask the Ministry of Health to impose the maximum quota for patients and doctors? Because how many cases can a consultant earn from? Each month? Each day? There were times in the cancer hospital when I waited in line to see a doctor just so I could ask about the need for a scan. Twice I asked. Twice I was snapped at. I have 6 of my 8 cycles of chemo, then my mastectomy surgery, then the final 2 chemo cycles. I did the first 6 cycles, I recovered from my surgery, went to see Dr. D. He said I needed chest radiation, 15 rounds before the remaining chemo. Took me 3 weeks going up and down to the hospital to get my name in the radiation book. I turn up on day 1. A resident opted to change the plan and Dr. D agrees with her. I would have a new chemo instead, paclitaxel. Paclitaxel is deadly. Each dose shaves away some years of your life. The strength I was finally regaining poured out of me. Everything exhausted me. And I haven't even told you about the pain. When it was time for my next dose, 3 weeks later, I couldn't go. I just couldn't go. We channeled Dr. Dehan privately. Shayne goes to see him, explains my exhaustion, my immobility. Dr. Dehan says, paclitaxel is known to cause heart conditions. Again, information I had not known. Take her off to a cardiologist, he advises. Don't return until the heart is better. 2 days later, and I am with Dr. Neomali. A heart echo indicates that my resting heartbeat was equivalent to me running at full speed. This is not good. She tells me it was definitely the paclitaxel. She prescribes a long-term dose of Corolan 5. She suggests I take a break from chemo for a while. The new plan had now cost me 6 weeks of a break in my treatment, and I had an old man's heart. Then the headaches start. At first, I ignore them, but they get worse by the day and eventually by the hour. I know now that metastatic breast cancers travel to the brain sometimes and should have been carefully watched and monitored by MRI scans, which would have indicated the edema in my brain. It would have indicated the skull tumors in close proximity to the blood-brain barrier. I promised myself never to return to Maharagama. It's time for a new oncologist, my GP says, after ordering the MRI that Apeksha didn't bother to. Dr. Sachini Rasnaika's name pops up. Hang on. I know her. She first diagnosed me 11 months ago, before I was taken away to the best doctors, to the best hospital. I remember she said she would heal me in 5 months. She asks me if I have been taking the tamoxifen. I tell her the best doctor said it was optional. She looks up from her notes, looks at me in disbelief. She notices that I'm ER/PR positive, which means 2/3 of my tumors are full by estrogen and progesterone. Tamoxifen should have been a daily dose since the day she prescribed it to help mitigate this. After seeing the brain MRI, she also orders 10 rounds of brain radiation. My head goes straight to Chernobyl. In a private hospital, you can ask for answers. In the state-owned dinosaur, you can't. So patients learn to be quiet, learn to take whatever comes, learn to let go of decisions, because they can't afford to pay for respect. Without anyone to witness what happens, without a record of negligence, without accountability, they could kill you and you wouldn't even know. Jerome tells me life has been particularly unfair to me. I think about what he said. Life. It put me in an abusive home, put me in an unhappy marriage to get away from the abusive home. Finally, I find my one, the one I was meant to be with. And then I get this damned disease. It clings to me like a stalker, grabbing onto my every faculty and not letting me go. But I also think about the good stuff, and I often feel I am more than the bad things that have happened to me. October 2020. Other women are queuing up for mastectomies at the Maharagama hospital. They find it strange that I had chosen to remove both breasts. To preserve one's sense of gender by leaving one breast intact makes absolutely no sense to me. But you will look like a boy, they say. Surgery day. I wake up, I want to retch. I had been told that Dr. P had steady hands and that his work was beautifully neat. My research indicates that there are several ways to do a mastectomy. I was scheduled for the full Monty without being told so. I would lose breast, my pec minor muscle, and more without my consent. I had wanted to ask about skin and nipple saving measures. Days later, I find out that not only was Panduka not in the theatre when I was being operated on, he was not even in the hospital. Oh, and by the way, they left behind some cancer deposits for good measure. This we discovered 1 year later, and I had to go into emergency chest radiation. Doro, who sees my scars with the titanium pins now dislodged, says to me, "This is not surgery. You have been butchered." I need a break. Can we ask my son to take over? Here are some drawings by Lucas, a little boy who lived in a tiny flat dealing with corona and cancer long before anyone else knew. I had 2 surgical drains drilled and fixed to either side of my chest, draining excess fluid from my chest cavity. The left drain, when ready to come out, was ripped out of me with the stitches still intact on purpose. I screamed. The nurse smiled. Evil. The women in white are dark. The very next week, the director posted notices around the hospital, naming me and shaming me for saying what I had said. He called on the gods to curse me and punish me. A few weeks later, he dropped dead. There will be no open coffin at my grave. Like my Muslim brothers and sisters, I want to be wrapped and buried in under 24 hours. I've been planning my funeral, you see. People think I'm morbid. I think I'm pragmatic. And it goes a little something like this. Nearly headless Nettie. That's what they'll call me. Another scalp tumor has grown. It takes up the entire back of my head, from ear to ear. Shayne carries me up the stairs, showers me, stands me up, sits me on the loo. I see patterns dancing in the invisible, detached hallucinations. Days escape me, time slides away. The pressure from the increasing fluid inside my head and this skull eater will gradually cause the blood-brain barrier to implode. Tick, 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 boom. Sure, I throw tantrums, small ones, big ones, and the occasional meltdown. And it's not always just at home. Dr. Satani suggested I channel radiologist. He kept asking me, is it really worth it? He asked me this question 3 times. I yell, I cry, I call Dr. Satani and yell again. I tell her I am done with her treatments, that I am ready to die, and that all she should tell me is how long I had left with what was left of my life. And she said, even when you don't trust yourself, trust that I will heal you. On Friday, 8th October 2021, I finally told her I do. What does it come down to? Ultimately, public or private, every single healthcare institution I have engaged with in the last 2 years has let me down, caused me undue pain, made mistakes, kept vital information from me, been negligent, made my cancer grow undetected. Am I that unlucky? Or is the reality that I am not the only one going through this? As a cancer patient, I am stuck between dying by my illness or dying by healthcare negligence. It's less about a case of being ready to die here. It's whose hands you may or may not die by. How many people die at the hands of healthcare nightmares like the ones I have had to endure? Why aren't we being counted? And why are there no investigations? It's a cover-up and we don't even know. This means the responsibility falls on the patient, the one with the least knowledge and the most to lose, to seek out the right information, ask the right questions. But even in an age of information, our archaic shame-based culture reigns supreme and prevents this from actually happening. We don't want to read up on wombs and boobs and vaginas. We just want to get better. Advocating for yourself inside such a system is virtually unheard of. But advocate I must. or I would have already been dead by now. Of course I'm ready to die, damn it. Any day, any time, just with a little less pain than I am enduring right now. The choice isn't yours, and even suicides have been known to fail. I am no defeatist. I am mutant, bloody but unbowed. I am ready to die, but I never said I'll surrender. What do we say to the god of death? Not today.
From Natalie's own words, that was the testimony of a single mother who has put her life at the hands of the Sri Lankan healthcare system. As a photographer, an artist and a single mother, last year she was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and that was during a pandemic. I believe that this particular artwork was very powerful for two different reasons. Firstly is that it's a battle with yourself. It's one thing to understand that your body is changing, that your mental state is changing, and that it's impacting everyone around you. But to document this entire process every step of the way is an entirely different challenge of its own. And secondly, there is also a battle with the system, with the healthcare system, and an attempt to overcome its shortcomings, its mismanagements, while battling with yourself. So Natalie and Shayne, thank you for that very moving piece of work.
Story behind my artwork. So our electrician teacher gave us 5 minutes and asked us to record all the sounds we heard while moving around the room. And then she asked us to do a creative project on it. So I painted my first artwork there, and some of the sounds I heard are in that painting.
Some may view this to be slightly a taboo topic in Sri Lanka because we rarely speak about it, and that is mental health. It has almost come to a point where we as Sri Lankans are not reluctant to ask for help, but we completely refuse to ask for help because we perceive that to be a sign of weakness. This prompted teen artist Shavindri to explore more about mental health awareness. She was prompted by listening to the experiences of her own friends, and today she joins us to talk about this. Now, Shavindri was part of the mentorship program leading up to the Children in Lockdown Arts Festival, where she was mentored by psychologist Evan Ekanayaka. She delved into research about different aspects related to mental health, and she presents this from the point of view of a teenager. So, let's hear it from her.
What do you think of when I ask you how you are doing? Is your automatic reaction to say, yeah, I'm doing great, despite how you really feel? Mental health has always been a discussion that has been pushed towards the fringe and ignored by society. Our mental well being under COVID 19 has been worsened as we have been forced to isolate ourselves from our friends and our daily lives. This has made us alienated in our struggles and our issues and made us feel that much more lonely. Mental illnesses in Sri Lanka has always been a taboo topic. But this has not only changed the narrative of the way that people going through these experiences, what these people going through these experiences have, but it has also shaped the way that people outside view these experiences as well. When we think about mental health, this has affected one of the main groups in Sri Lanka, children and teenagers, where we have been constantly told by adults that this is the reality of our situation and we just have to move on. But these words aren't enough anymore. There comes a time where we need adults in our lives to sit down with us and have an honest conversation about what these struggles really are. Maybe it's going to be a 5-minute conversation, maybe it's going to be a 15-minute one. But either way, it's important that this discussion be had with children because these are issues which affect children from a very young age. When we think about where children spend the most time at, it's either at home or at school. Yet in most cases, or at least in some cases, these institutions both have failed to address the main problem of mental health. While in schools you have a lot of focus being pushed on physical fitness from PE lessons to health textbooks, they fail to address the main issue of mental well-being. But the few schools that do address these issues, while they get weekly counselors to come in and talk to these teenagers feel as if they can't have an honest discussion with these counselors because they're not afforded the same anonymity and privacy that they would have been otherwise. This has made them distrustful of authority figures in school and they're less likely to approach them with the problems that they have. When we think about mental health and the atmosphere that has been created about these issues, adults have framed these issues not just that it's a topic which is off limits, but it's also something that people should be ashamed of. Children and teenagers feel as if they are the source of the problem as opposed to the experiences that they go through. This means that they tend to isolate themselves from their loved ones and not only lash out at others, but lash out at themselves as well. In a time of uncertainty and loss, where mental health should be the most pivotal point of discussion, children feel reluctant to talk about it because because they feel it is not only a shameful issue, but they will be mocked for it as well. The reason I chose mental health as a topic for discussion is because I think that I can shed some light upon it. Because mental illnesses have one thing in common. They make people feel alone and isolated in their struggles because they feel as if no one can understand what they're going through. But that is not true. There are so many people in Sri Lanka itself who go through a variety of these issues, from teenagers to young children. But at the end of the day, the, but at the end of the day, because of the barriers that exist in Sri Lanka, people feel as if they can't reach out to one another. I hope my poems make people feel less alone, but also feel like that they can talk to other people about these issues. I chose to base my poems around the following themes of grief, anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicide, anorexia, and bulimia. When we think about depression, it has been dubbed the common cold of mental illnesses. But the problem is, it goes much deeper than that. It is a persistent feeling of sadness that you experience in your daily activities, where it prevents you from having a proper sleep schedule or a proper eating schedule, where it prevents you from concentrating on the daily activities that you do and inhibits the social interactions that you have with your friends and family. It is not something that one can easily get over with a snap of their fingers. It is something which takes time and effort to heal from, and people should be given the space to deal with these issues. When we think about anxiety, maybe most of us have experienced some form of anxiety one way or another. Whether it's a test that we have to deal with in the following months, or whether it's the fact that we didn't do our homework before school. But regardless of which, people who have anxiety disorders go through crippling fear and worry over everyday situations, from sending a text message to having a call with one of their friends to writing a note to teachers or an essay. Telling people who have anxiety disorders that anxiety is something that everyone experiences and one can easily get over is not always true and doesn't help their situation. In extreme cases, anxiety can also often lead to panic attacks, which can last for a few minutes or beyond. These panic attacks is important to learn how to deal with properly. Especially teachers should learn how to deal with these issues because it is something that a lot of children experience most of the time in their lives. Grief has often become synonymous with the COVID-19 pandemic. As children, we have seen the death of loved ones one way or another. But the way that people deal with grief, especially children, is quite different. Because the way society has framed it is that grief is something that can be only experienced if you cry all the time and if you feel sad. But that is not always true. People experience grief in different ways, where, yes, sometimes they have emotional outbursts or they have intense emotions which they can't deal with. But for others, it means numbing themselves to the pain that they feel every day and trying to ignore the problem. But if grief isn't properly dealt with, it can lead to long term anxiety or depression. Self harm. When people who commit self harm are when people who commit self-harm show their scars to other people, it is often met with horror and disgust because it is seen as something that is so disgusting that it shouldn't appear in society at all. But people who commit self-harm don't do it because just because they have just because they want to. They do it because they feel that it is the only way for them to cope with the emotions that have been brought about, because they're often stuck in a vicious cycle where they go through an intense experience and then they have outbursts of emotions which they cannot deal with, so they resort to getting relief by cutting themselves. Then this cycle continues to repeat itself again. People self-harm in different ways, from cutting oneself to burning or bruising one's body. If you think that someone is committing self harm, don't approach them in a crowd or confront them directly. Make sure you take them privately to a corner and talk to them about these issues and ask them if they are alright. Don't push them to be in an uncomfortable situation which they cannot get out of. Anorexia and bulimia are one of the most common eating disorders that children often face, especially teenagers. While there are differences between them, anorexia is a fear of intaking calories because you think that either because you want to exert control over your life by exercising or dieting, or it's the fact that you have distorted perception of your body and you want to reduce weight. This is often being brought about by things and exacerbated by things like social media, where this false sense of perfection is perpetuated. Bulimia, on the other hand, is where you binge eat and you purge those calories within a short period of time. because you are ashamed of the calories and the food that you have consumed because you believe that there is a lack of self control that you have. People often resort to eating disorders in extreme circumstances where they feel that there is no other way but for them to resort to do this. In the instances that you or you know that you or anyone else who has these eating disorders, I urge you to seek treatment. But if you don't want to, reach out to others and ask them how to deal with these issues as well. Attempted suicide rates rose during COVID-19 lockdown in Sri Lanka. But the way society framed these issues is either that media and books tend to romanticize it and use it as a plot line which disappears after a few episodes in a season or a few chapters in books, and then it never appears again, or it's vilified by the rest of society. Suicide is a sensitive subject not just for the people who go through it, but also for those who have had loved ones committed as well. It's important to know that you shouldn't lash out at people who have attempted suicide, but create a safe environment where they feel comfortable to talk about these issues. When we think about mental health issues, they aren't just experienced by people who are 18 or 17. They can be experienced by people as young as 12. It's important to note that you should be able to talk to your children about these issues in a safe and calm environment. Mental health issues have often, especially eating disorders, have often been framed as issues that girls go through because they have created this environment that if boys go through it, that they're somehow considered weak and less masculine. Because of these issues that are there in society, boys itself have difficulty in coming out and speaking about issues that they face in terms of eating disorders and self-harm. It's important to note that when we talk about these issues, especially issues like suicide and depression, it is often vilified by society and portrayed as a sin that is committed against your God. The idea that somehow people who commit self harm or attempt to commit suicide are weaker than the rest of us, but also more sinful, has not only affected how teenagers view these problems, but also affected the way that parents view these problems as well. In my poem, The Little Things, you hear a parent's reaction to their son committing self harm. And the parents wonder whether it was they themselves who had created the environment or were they the cause of the son's distress. Parents might have had a million questions going through their head. Maybe they think, what if they lash out at me? What if they lash out at themselves? What if they deny the problem? What if my relatives judge me for it? What if I am the cause of that very same distress? There is no straightforward answer to the questions that you have. It is not an MCQ test paper where you can tick off one box after the other and there is no clear set pathway to deal with these issues. Most of the time, parents who discover that children are going through these issues are most likely people who have never thought about these issues, but have also just come to a new understanding about this as well. While this may come as a shock to most parents, it is also important to know that these are most likely discussions that children have had with their friends within school as well. Sometimes they often resort to things like self harm because of peer pressure, and it's important to know the cause before you tackle it. It's also important to note that you need to create a safe and loving environment where children and teenagers alike can feel as if they can properly process the emotions that they go through, but also can talk to you about these issues where they don't feel like they're being judged for it or being ignored by it. When we think about these issues, they have one thing in common. They make people seem powerless and insignificant because they feel as if in the greater spectrum of things that they don't really matter. These are things that people often experience in their day-to-day life. But it's worse when you're a child. Because when you're a teenager, you often think that no one on earth is going to understand you because somehow neither your parents do, and the only people who have your back are your friends. People often forget that what it's like to be a child growing up in society. The want to be pretty and popular and constantly want to be part of the it clique. The constant need to feel important and to be the cool girl in any situation. Maybe you want to appear to be the tough guy in the grade, or maybe you want to appear to be the prettiest one in your class. But either way, childhood and puberty itself can be so isolating, and these mental health issues that children go through further pushes them down the hole. It's also important to note that these mental health issues make people feel alone. But that is not always true. There are always other people who are going to be going through these issues, whether or not you see or hear them. There's always someone out there in the world who has experienced these issues that you have, who has faced the same dilemmas and the same questions that go on in your head. Mental health issues are a vicious cycle of self doubt and guilt and rage and anger as to why you are the person who is going through this. Maybe some people revel in the depression that they go through because they feel that it is the only way for them to feel some form of emotion. Maybe others don't. But whichever way you're going through, it's important to see that you can always reach out to other people. Maybe you can't see them, maybe you can't hear them, maybe you can't even feel them, but you are always connected to each other through your agonies and through the pains that you have gone through. I know that my poems may not touch on the realities or the true experiences of people, but I hope that it's a reminder to every person that there are people who know what you're going through and understand the struggles that you face. And maybe somewhere out there in the world, it will help make a teenager feel a little less scared, a little less lonely, and a little more hopeful.
Children in Lockdown Arts Festival was initially planned to be an actual physical event, but given the circumstances and the situation in the country, we had to adjust, and that meant us resorting to the virtual medium. Now, resorting to the virtual medium in itself has its own problems, and we were in need of a substantial amount of additional resources, and we had to completely change our plans. This is where our sponsors came through and helped make this festival a reality. We're extremely grateful to all our sponsors, starting off with our main partner, Kinder Not Health for Sri Lanka, our festival partners, the German Embassy in Sri Lanka, Goethe Institute of Colombo, where we are at right now, Sunetra Bandaranaike Trust, NLEAP, Lionel Wendt Theatre, Music Matters, Oneness Centre, Yuma Foundation, News First, and everyone else who helped in numerous ways to make sure that the Children in Lockdown Arts Festival comes to life. As I mentioned earlier, Shavindri was inspired to get into this type of research based on what she heard from her friends. I had the pleasure of having a chat with Shavindri for a brief moment, but the content that she gave me was mind-blowing. Coming from a teenager, she spoke to me about how most people who face mental health challenges feel as if they are alone and they don't have any helpline at all. She spoke to me about how the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated all these problems and has kept all of us apart from each other. She spoke to me about how the current family structure, the school system, is not equipped to handle matters of this nature. quite interestingly, she also spoke to me about self-harm. She thinks that the present generation and the older generations have quite different views when it comes to themes like this. We like to thank Shavindri for delving into such deep research, and would also like to encourage others to research and speak about matters of this nature, creating more public awareness, because that, we believe, is essential in today's society. With all of that, we move on to the next artwork screening we have for you today, which is a short film, Thotti Meenkal by Manivanan. We look at the pandemic from the point of view of a little child who does not understand any of this nonsense behind a pandemic, restrictions, lockdowns and all of that. All she wants to find out is as to why she is not allowed to play with her friend anymore. Let's find out.
என்ன கொஞ்ச நேரம் விளையாட வாங்க. அம்மா ஹோம்வொர்க் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க, முடிக்கணும். கொஞ்ச நேரம் அம்மா ஏசுவாங்க. நான் ஒரு பால் வாங்கியிருக்கேனே. வீட்டுக்குள்ள போயிடுச்சு.
டச் பண்ண வேண்டாமா? அப்போ தானே வெளியிலேருந்து வந்திருக்கேன். குளிச்சுட்டு அப்புறம் பிள்ளைய தூக்குறேன்.
அப்பா என்ன என்னைக்கும் தூக்க மாட்டீங்களா?
ஓ ஷாமல சேண்டு அப்படி கலவில் வேண்டோடனே கோமரிக்கு என்னண்டே பாட்டிக்கு பலம் போனது என்னைக்கு?
ஏன் சோகமா இருக்கீங்க? அப்பா என்ன தூக்கல. கவலைப்படாதீங்க. என் அப்பா பர்த்டேக்கு எனக்கு ஒரு பட்டர்ஃப்ளை வாங்கி தந்தாரு. நான் எடுத்துட்டு வரேன். ஐயோ அம்மா எடுக்க விடுறாங்க இல்லையே. பட்டர்ஃப்ளையா? ஓ ஐயோ எனக்கு ரொம்ப பிடிக்குமே, ப்ளீஸ் காட்டுங்கண்ணே. அப்பா பர்த்டேக்கு வாங்கி கொடுத்தாரு, அம்மா எடுக்க விடுறாங்க இல்லையே.
இங்கே கழுவின உடுப்போடு வெளியில் போட்டுட்டு போன உடுப்பை போடாதீங்கன்னு எத்தனை தடவை சொல்கிறது? எத்தனை தடவை சொன்னாலும் கேட்க மாட்டீங்களா? இப்போ பாருங்கள், அவ்வளோத்தையும் நான் திரும்ப கழுவணும்.
ஏய், 54 பேர் கொரோனாவில் செத்துருக்காங்க. என்ன
இப்போ தான் பார்க்குறீங்களா? காலையிலேயே நியூஸில் சொல்லிட்டாங்க.
நமக்கு எங்கே நியூஸ் பார்க்குறதுக்கெல்லாம் நேரம் இருக்கு? இதில் இப்படி விளையாட விடாதுன்னு உனக்கு எத்தனை தடவை சொல்லியிருக்கேன்? இதை பார்க்க கூட உனக்கு நேரம் இல்லையா?
நேரம் இல்லை தான். உங்களுக்கு எவ்வளோ சொன்னாலும் புரியாதே. அதோட நான் சொல்கிறது அவன் எங்கே கேட்குறா?
அவள் கேட்குற மாதிரி சொல்லணும்.
ஹர்ஷினி இங்கே வாங்க, உள்ளுக்கு இருந்து விளையாடுங்க.
ம் சரி. ஹர்ஷினி, என்னம்மாச்சு பிள்ளைக்கு? சொல்லு தம்பி. இவனுங்க வேற இந்த நேரத்தில் தேங்காய் எண்ணெயில் கேன்சர்னு மாறி மாறி நியூஸை போட்டு நம்ம பிஸ்னஸை கெடுக்கிறானுங்க.
ஹர்ஷினி, என்னாச்சுமா?
எங்களும் அப்பாவும் என்ன தினேஷ் கூட விளையாடவே விடலை. நான் வீட்லேயே தனியாக இருக்கேன். ஸ்கூல் ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸும் என் கூட விளையாடல, தினேஷும் விளையாடல.
சரி, தூங்குங்க. என்னம்மா, என்ன வேணும்?
டால் விளையாட வாங்க.
அப்பா வந்துடுவார் தானே? அம்மா சமைச்சிட்ருக்குறேன், சமைச்சு முடிச்சுட்டு பாரு. ம்,
தூங்கம்மா. எப்பவுமே இப்படி சொல்லிட்டு வர மாட்டீங்க.
Oh dear. George is always smart in his way. Much later. Oh, hell no!
வேணுமா? ஓ, கவலைப்படாதீங்க, இருங்க வரேன்.
ஐயோ கடவுளே! அப்பா, இங்க பாருங்களேன், அப்பா அல்பம் எல்லாத்தையும் வெட்டி வச்சிருக்கிறாப்பா. ஐயோ, இந்த கத்திரிக்கோலை எடுக்காதுன்னு இவளுக்கு எத்தனை தடவை சொல்லி இருக்கிறேன். எல்லாத்தையும் விட்டு நாசமாக்கி வச்சிருக்கு இந்த கடவுளே. ஐயோ,
ஏய், நான் உனக்கு சொல்லியிருக்கேன் தானே, அவளை எப்பவுமே கவனிச்சுக்கிறேன்.
எல்லாத்துக்கும் என்னையே குறை சொல்லுங்க.
இப்ப பாரு அவ செஞ்சு வச்சிருக்க வேலையை.
அடியே, உன்னை கத்திரிக்கோலை எடுக்க விடாமன்னு சொல்றேன் தானே. கேட்கறியா? இன்னத்துக்கு இந்த கத்திரி எடுக்கிற, கத்திரி எடுக்க எல்லாத்தையும் கத்திரிச்சு வச்சிருக்க. எடுப்பியா சொல்லு, எடுப்பியா? எடுப்பியா? எடுப்பியா?
Thotti Meenkal means tanked fish. To me, that final frame where the child draws actually captures the essence of the story. It sums up the thought process behind many children in this pandemic. Stop for a moment and imagine how difficult it was for us to be stuck inside our homes for the longest time. But at least we understood why that was necessary. But now think in terms of what a small child would be thinking, who has no idea or awareness about what's happening around him or her. As adults, we perceive and we understand things differently. And children understand and grasp things in completely different ways. Why that is so? Maybe because their thoughts are not tainted by the prejudices that we adults carry. So it's natural for them to be confused, to question about things, to want to know things, which is why we think that communicating to them, even the most difficult topics, is essential, and it will help them adjust and adapt to circumstances such as the one we are facing right now. With all of that, we come to the end of the morning session, but we do have our professional panel joining with us to discuss deeper into these issues. So while inviting all of you to join with us on Zoom to view the panel discussion, we go for a short break.
මුච්ච කතා කරනවද? සිසි අයියෝ මුච්චේ 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 මියුට් වෙලා මුච්චේ අපිට මුච්චව ඇහෙන්නේ මුච්චේ
මේ මං හිතන්නේ මුච්චේ මුච්චගේ මයික් එක ඔෆ් වෙලා නේද? ඔය
මුත්තේ මුත්තේ ඔය මයික් එක ඔෆ් වෙලා අයියෝ මෙසේජ් එකක් දාන්නත් තිබ්බා. ඒත් එයා දන්නේ නැහැ chat එක ඕපන් කරගන්න. මට බුලී
ඒක තමයි මොකද කියන්නේ?
මෙන්න සිසි මුච්ච කෝල් කරනවා මුච්ච කෝල් කරනවා හෙලෝ මුච්චේ මුච්චගේ මයික් එක ඔෆ් වෙලා
නාලා කොල්ලෝ
ඔෆ් වෙලා තියෙන ඇහෙනවද
නාලා කොල්ලෝ
කියන දේවල් ඇහෙන්නේ
කොහොමද බං මේ ඔන් කරගන්නේ
මුච්චේ
ඩක් හිටහන් මේ මගේ අතින් මේ මොකක් හරි
මුච්චේ
All my friends, I hear them take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know. Please don't make any sudden moves. You don't know the half of the abuse. All my friends, I hear them take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know. Please don't make any sudden moves. You don't know the half of the abuse.
Are you sure you don't mind listening to this?
That's what the room's all about. If you've got a problem, just get it out.
During lockdown, we all got an opportunity to understand the importance of family time. The greatest gift we can give our family is staying safe. During this crucial time, I, as a child, realized the importance of trying to keep our loved ones safe and making sure that we all are responsible to make it happen. Your home is your safety zone. Family is more valuable than gold.
The reason I got inspired to do this painting with a mask is because people need to wear them as protection. I thought of drawing flowers as a positive sign, though it's a dark period.
Due to COVID-19 virus and the lockdowns, I couldn't go to school. I had to study online. We couldn't go out to play. We couldn't go on trips. My mother worked from home. Please wash your hands and wear masks. Keep the distance. Do not spread the virus. I want to go to school and play with my friends. Thank you.